Some people don't just dislike losing, they experience it as a personal collapse. A mistake isn't just a mistake, a setback isn't just a setback. It feels like something has been taken from them. These are the people who replay losses long after everyone else has moved on, who remember the exact moment things went wrong, who feel tension rise the instant the outcome is no longer certain. For them, losing doesn't end. When the event is over, it follows them. People who hate losing often look driven on the outside, focused, competitive, unwilling to settle. But beneath that drive is something more fragile. Losing threatens how they understand themselves. Winning confirms competence. Losing raises doubt. So outcomes begin to carry weight beyond their size. A small failure feels heavy. A close loss feels unbearable. Anything less than first place feels like exposure. This is why people who hate losing often struggle with rest. Stillness gives the mind time to replay what went wrong. Silence invites comparison. They push themselves forward, not just to succeed, but to outrun that feeling. Another common misunderstanding is that these people are confident. Many are not. Their intensity is not always belief in their ability. Often it is fear of falling short. They prepare excessively, they double-check everything, they demand a lot from themselves, not because they enjoy the pressure, but because pressure feels safer than regret. People who hate losing also tend to personalize outcomes. They don't separate performance from identity. If they win, they feel worthy. If they lose, they feel diminished. This creates a narrow emotional range, high highs, low lows. There is little neutrality. Competition becomes less about the task and more about self-protection. Beating others matters, but not as much as proving something to themselves. They may struggle to enjoy games, sports, or challenges meant to be fun. Fun disappears. The moment winning is no longer guaranteed. Losing in those moments feels humiliating, even when no one else is watching. This is why people who hate losing often avoid situations where they might fail. They choose environments where they already excel. They avoid learning curves, not because they lack curiosity, but because early failure feels intolerable. They want certainty, control, an outcome that can be managed. And when control slips, frustration rises quickly. Anger after losing is common, not because they're sore losers, but because anger feels better than disappointment. Disappointment points inward, anger points outward. So they argue, they justify, they explain, anything to soften the blow of what losing suggests. People who hate losing are often very aware of how they are seen. They compare themselves constantly. They measure progress in ranks, scores, results. Validation becomes external. Success must be visible, and without visible success, they feel unsteady. This doesn't mean they don't grow. Many become highly skilled, but growth is often driven by fear rather than curiosity. They are chasing something, not always victory, but relief. Relief from the feeling that losing creates. Relief from doubt. Relief from the question of whether they are enough. And as long as losing feels threatening, winning will never feel fully satisfying, because the pressure doesn't disappear, it just waits for the next test. Over time, hating loss begins to change. How a person moves through life. Decisions become filtered through one question: what happens if I fail? This question doesn't always stop action. Sometimes it sharpens it. Other times, it quietly narrows the path. People who hate losing often choose certainty over exploration. They stick to what they're already good at. They repeat strategies that have worked before. Growth becomes controlled rather than curious. This mindset also shows up in relationships. Disagreements feel threatening. Being wrong feels humiliating. Compromise can feel like defeat. So they argue their point longer than necessary. They struggle to let things go. They need the final word, not to dominate, but to feel stable again. Losing an argument can feel just as unsettling as losing a competition because it carries the same meaning. I was outperformed. I misjudged. I wasn't enough. As time passes, this pressure accumulates. The person may appear strong, but internally they are always bracing. Every challenge becomes a test. Every outcome feels loaded. Rest doesn't come easily because rest invites reflection, and reflection often leads back to losses, past ones, near ones, imagined ones. This can lead to burnout, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. Motivation fades, enjoyment thins, wins start to feel empty, because winning was never about joy. It was about avoiding something else. Avoiding the feeling of falling behind, avoiding the sense of being exposed, avoiding the belief that losing reveals the truth. At some point, people who hate losing begin to notice something unsettling. Even when they win, the relief is brief. The mind moves quickly to the next test, the next standard, the next comparison. There is no finish line. This is where the shift begins, not through insight, but through fatigue. They start to see that the problem was never competition itself. It was what losing was allowed to mean, because losing was never proof of inadequacy. It was treated that way. It was allowed to define worth instead of experience, identity instead of outcome. Change begins when losing is no longer used as a verdict, when a mistake becomes information, when a setback becomes data, when being outperformed stops being personal. This doesn't remove drive, it refines it. The person doesn't stop wanting to win. They stop needing winning to feel whole, and that difference changes everything. Competition becomes engagement, not defense. Effort becomes expression, not protection. Growth becomes open-ended. The pressure lifts, not because outcomes stop mattering, but because identity stops being at risk. The people who hate losing don't lose their edge. When this happens, they finally gain something more valuable. Freedom from the constant need to prove, and once that freedom appears, losing stops feeling like a collapse. It becomes part of the process, not a judgment. And for the first time, winning doesn't feel like survival. It feels like choice.